Well, no, I don't know what I did, but here I am again.
And the meeting is now streaming.
Oh, Tom, that might have been the problem. Yeah.
Well, we don't really know what the problem is.
There were problems with both YouTube and Google on that night,
And
Wow.
Buckeyes inside.
and Zoom,
All right.
according
so
to
we
Down
are
Detector.
live. Okay, we are live now on YouTube.
All right. Do we have anybody clicking in yet on YouTube?
Well, just me
Yeah.
right now.
Hi, Tom.
How are you, Greg?
Wonderful. Yourself?
Good.
Greg, are you going to go to the event tomorrow?
I'll probably stay back. I think we're going to send we'll send the guys on the road tomorrow. They're going to have quite a few people down there.
Will Chagrin Falls have any ability to limit the time?
Well, I'm trying to fix this computer, but Chip, it was canceled, but that doesn't mean people aren't going to show up.
Oh, I see. Okay. I didn't
So
realize-
their
yeah.
planning is if it's still going to happen, but the event organizer has canceled it. But
I see.
there's still rumors going around, but it's hard to say. They can't predict what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the live stream is working fine.
All right. Hopefully we get our full participation that we had last time. We've delayed. Oh. Yeah, we're 7 minutes early, so we're good.
Yes.
Chip, I'm sitting out here in the cigar lounge. This is where you should be right now.
Yeah, I'll put it on my list here.
Okay.
Chip, did you get the stuff I sent you?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Well, while we're waiting, somebody tell me what happens if I hit this button that says share screen?
Then we'll all see your screen.
Oh, okay. I don't want that.
Probably not.
Okay.
Oh.
Is Tim on the phone and with the screen?
No, that's actually Mary.
Yeah,
Oh.
her name just popped up.
There we go.
Oh, there he is.
Okay. All right, Chinese fire. Come on.
We should get some good Gates Mills music playing until we get ready to do this.
That's a good idea.
What, any suggestion as to what is Gates Mills music?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, pretty soon we'll hear the 5 o'clock chimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ian, were you able to complete the Improvement Society letters?
As I was telling Karen, I'm still working on them, Chip.
I know you got to
So-
do it on your own time, so.
Right. So as soon as this meeting gets going, I'm probably going to not pay attention, and that's what I'm working on. So, but
Right.
I'm here if we need to be.
Excellent.
When she's done, she'll give you the paperwork that I worked through it all on.
Yeah, good, good. Okay. Well, we're getting close, but.
Karen, why is everybody else crystal clear, but you're all foggy?
I have no idea. I was trying to look at that, but I'm on a laptop this time other than my iPad. I have no idea. I have no clue.
Can you tell yourself by looking at the picture?
Yeah, that it's a little bit not as sharp.
Yeah, right.
I have no idea. But if
Okay.
my son gets within close range, I'll have him come and look, but he's out in the middle of the backyard.
There you go.
We could try something, Karen, if you want.
What's that?
As you look at your screen, there's a shield up at the top left with a check mark in it.
These things are on the bottom, I think. A shield?
It looks like a shield.
I don't see that.
If you move your cursor, it might highlight or might come up.
Is it by participants or share screen, record, reactions?
Well, on mine, it's up at the top left.
On mine, it's.
Oh, wait, I just see it. Yeah. Okay.
So take your cursor and click on that.
Yeah. I got it. Now what?
Then you're going to see a display.
Yep.
Video. Click on
Yep.
video.
Yep.
All right. So now that you clicked on video, there's a thing where you can set the camera.
Yeah.
So it may say like high resolution or something like that.
I only have one choice, it looks like.
What you might try is down a little bit from there. It says enable HD.
Yeah. Try that one.
Yeah, click on that.
Is that
A little
better?
better, a little bit.
Right.
Hello, Chris Howard.
What?
Hello.
Hi.
And there's Surenda.
That looks a little better, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Uh, Hello, Susan.
Hello, Chip. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks.
Hello, Stefan.
Hey, Chip, how are you?
Good. Hey, somebody mentioned to me that they had some benchmarking experience. Was that you?
Yeah, it was. I was on a team that did consulting for the city of Detroit during their bankruptcy.
Yeah. All right.
The state auditor has done benchmarking in the past too.
Okay. All right, we're still have 4 people and 3 were on the call last week, so they know the meeting, and I obviously sent a reminder, so.
Here we go.
Okay. Tell me who's coming on, Tom, as you.
Matt Jameson.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. How's it going?
Good.
All right, still waiting for 3 more. We'll wait for at least 2 and then get going. How many are on YouTube, Tom? Anybody?
3 people, which I'm one of the 3.
All
And,
right.
and Jean might be another one.
I'm actually not this time.
All right, there's Aaron. Hello, Aaron.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right, I'll just wait for one more. We have 2 more that are hopefully joining.
Karen, are you seeing more people on your laptop now than you were with your?
Yes, I have probably everybody. 9, 4, 15, I guess we got here, 14. Looks like somebody's trying to come in or something.
Tom, anybody trying to come in?
Not at the moment.
All right, I will make a call here.
Vika, Howard, yes. Jameson.
Yeah, Warvika and Debbie Moss Bat are the 2 that haven't joined yet.
Kramer. Mute.
Hey, Debbie, this is Chip Allwarder. I see. All right. Okay, doke. We'll wait. All right, great. We'll wait good. We'll wait 1 more second. Thanks. Debbie's trying to join, so I will call Anthony and see. He might still be on vacation. All right. We'll wait for Debbie. I'm not sure. Anthony went off on vacation and actually did not respond to my invite, so he may be tuned out while he's on vacation, which is fine. So we'll wait. Debbie's still trying to get in.
Hey, Chief Greg, how are things in Cleveland? Are they quieting down a little bit?
Yeah, I think they really stayed on top of it yesterday. They were, they were all out in full force yesterday. So a lot of rumors, a lot of information sharing back and forth, but they got a real handle on it.
We had curfew last night at 6 p.m. and we're curfewed again tonight at 6 p.m.
Oh, really?
Debbie, good.
Whole city of Charleston, lockdown.
Are you in Charleston, Mary? Ah, okay. Debbie, thank you. There you are.
Technical difficulties.
All right. We resolved the YouTube one anyway, so we're off to the races here. So, all right.
Great.
Again, Anthony Boervika, I believe, is on vacation. So otherwise, thank you, everybody. Apologies for last week. It may be just a coincidence, but we did start the YouTube session before everybody came on because it may have been a memory issue. So whether it's a coincidence or that's what worked, but we are on live on YouTube as well right now. So Chief Tom, I think you're the host. So if you want to mute everybody, and then again, if you want to speak, you just simply unmute. So obviously, if you mute me, I'll quickly unmute here. So, all right. So I'm going to put up on the screen the agenda, and then I will take it off. Okay. So Tom, you've disabled participant screen sharing. Can you enable it? And then. right. Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen. Just to quickly review the agenda, if you hopefully have a copy in front of you, I won't keep this up, but I do want to quickly review the goals of the subcommittee. Then just give a quick highlight of the village organization, staffing and services. Discuss, and I'll make it a very high level, the village finances. I'll pause at each of these points for comments and input. Then I just want to touch base on, almost all of you have sent in questions and observations. I have them organized. We're kind of evaluating or trying to debate how best to answer. I don't want to have the whole committee meeting today just going through answers. So I want to cover some other things today, but in future meetings, we'll try to start knocking out a lot of the questions that have come up. Then I want to go through, and this is where I really want input, is I will just quickly go through the questions and observations, and then see what we might want to address as different areas as a committee. And then with that, I want to go through next steps and finally to try to nail down some dates for the next meetings. So with that, I will get off of screen sharing. I don't know quite how to do that. Let me go back to my screen here. Stop share, there we go. So goals of the subcommittee. The first one is obviously the title of our committee, which is to determine and assess opportunities to share services. Now that could include literally sharing a service where we do the service and another community does the service, obviously one or the other, or maybe we split it somehow, or outsourcing as we do with the EMS and the dispatch today, or possibly insourcing. And that would include what potential services should we think about? And when we go through the organization chart, we can talk about that. And then with what communities or other organizations. When you think about the location of Gates Mills, obviously, if, for example, Hunting Valley would be willing, that might be great. Hunting Valley is in a whole different situation than we are, but I've had background discussions with some of the council people of Hunting Valley, and you know, they've indicated an interest in sitting down and chatting. So whether that might lead to something is hard to say. Nobody's obviously committed to it. When you think about some of the other communities, Mayfield Village is in a different financial situation with Progressive Insurance. Mayfield Heights is obviously significantly larger. Then you get a little bit more distance, so sharing could become a little more difficult, but obviously Moreland Hills may be something that's not why we've asked Susan necessarily to be on our committee, but she has looked at this from her role, and so we think, you know, hopefully can provide some thoughts on what she's seen from her experience. And then you've got small communities that get a little bit further away, but doesn't mean that we can't figure things out, even if it's a little bit of a drive. So I don't want to get blocked by thinking, gee, we might want to share, but we can't think of anybody. I think we want to be creative in that regard. So that would be one of the primary goals. A second one, and that's what a lot of your questions are organized around, is determine and assess opportunities to reduce village expenses. And certainly a lot of questions just to understand some of our current expenses, but then so a lot of interesting thoughts. Have we thought of this or that? And all of that just stimulates some good questions and good thinking. So hold on a second. I'm going to have to stop that. And then somewhat related to that, but I think could indicate some other things we might then want to look at, is to benchmark various village expenses. Obviously, it could be headcount related, but which in turn relates to expenses, or just some of the expense areas. I think in our first call, or to some of you, I've indicated as an example that may or may not work, but we put a lot, salt is a major expenditure. We put a lot of salt down, and I think as a community, we do a very prudent job of it. But it might be interesting to see what the comparable expenses in other communities on something like a per road mile basis or something like that. Then again, of course, you get subtleties like we have steep hills and make special effort to make sure that we've got, got salt down on those. Another community that's all flat or not have as many steep hills may not have quite the same. But again, those are, that might pop out and then we could get explanations. So whether that's an example, it just is a thought starter. So those are the three goals. So before we go on, you guys, saw some of this material last week. I've talked with each of you. Any reflection on those goals? Any questions about them? Remember, you're on mute, so if you want to say anything, unmute. You got to hit unmute.
Yeah, Chip,
Yes.
how do we make sure that we don't silo too much compared to the other two subcommittees? Or how do we work with the other subcommittees if we think there is overlap?
Good question, Chris. And some of the questions do touch on revenue opportunities. I am forwarding those on to the subcommittee that's focused on the revenue. I will say, I think we've got to work out some of the logistics, but obviously the other two subcommittees are having their meetings. And anybody we're all part of the long range planning committee, finance planning committee. So I think, you could listen in on those, but I think it's just, we're aware, obviously I'm aware, Mary Reynolds is aware, Karen's aware, the three department heads well, all four department heads, Janet's on as well, are aware of what the other two committees are looking at. So, bring them up and then we'll just make sure that the other committees have heard it and see if we can get a response, I guess is the best I can say.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, I think between Karen and the department heads and Janet and myself, we're all attending all the meetings. And so I think a part of our shared responsibility is to make sure that coordination and communication take place, but that also each of the subcommittee chairs, I would expect, would be actively communicating with each other to make sure that everything's getting covered and information and questions developed in one area get reflected in the other area. Ultimately, the whole thing gets presented to council, and council will really be the platform to kind of weave everything together as well.
Yeah, and I apologize, Tim. Obviously, I should have mentioned you as the quarterback to this whole thing. So any other questions or observations on the goals of the subcommittee? All right, so I will now go back to share the screen and quickly put up the organization chart. I guess I just do that. Where's the next page here? Okay. So I will leave this up for a second. You've perhaps were able to study it. The head count is it's a little difficult. Janet keeps reminding me that some individuals work across departments. And as you will notice, we have a lot of part-time and or volunteers, so are on call rather, I'm sorry, but so this may not be exact. I think the full-time is accurate, but I did put preliminary at the top of this chart. And if there's any correction, I will note that in future meetings. But finance and admin is one person full-time, one person part-time. The service department is 9 full-time and 3 part-time. That of those 3 part-time, one of those is summer help. for obviously the in-season, some of the lawn work, et cetera. And the other 2 part-time are at the community center, community house from time to time, but again, they are part-time. The police, 12 full-time, 5 part-time, if we have that correct. And the fire, note that please, 1 part-time, that's Tom, our fire chief, and everybody else is on call, meaning that, and Tom can go through that at some point if you have questions about how they get paid. So those are the 4 basic functions. Finance is an admin. You can read the long list there, obviously things that you would expect, but it's a lot more than that. And in many senses, what Janet's role helps to coordinate a lot of the activities going on with service, police, and fire, in addition to what you might think of as the controller type function of keeping track of all the finances and helping to quarterback the budget process, and then all the audit work we have to do for state, et cetera. So, so that's a very, very full job right there. Our part-time in that department is our front desk, and obviously handles all the calls coming in and does a lot of the administrative tasks and whatever else comes up as people come into the front desk and help support, again, some of the other departments as well. Service is the roads and culverts. That's really heavy summertime activity. Snow removal in the winter, and the parks and roadsides, that's maintaining those. So that's cutting the grass on all of the parks and roadsides. The cemetery, anytime there's activity in the cemetery, that's our service department. The buildings and grounds of the village, our downtown area, so to speak, those buildings down there, maintains all the village vehicles. We have a full-time maintenance person. As I indicated, they staff the community house. And a lot of the service department personnel do volunteer for fire and EMT. And again, Dave can go through some of those details, but if, you know, that may even, some of that may be while they're on regular hours or certainly in after hours. One side comment, or sort of one of my observations on the service department, one of the big sort of constraints, I guess I might call it, is in the winter time, the need to have 4, if not 5 plow trucks on the road. That can happen late at night after the full team has worked a full day, and then a storm comes up, and so they've got to get back on duty, so to speak. They all have a board on who's next on call, so to speak. If we have to plow the roads at night, and that's fine for one night, but you could have a snowfall the next night and the next night and the next night, and so rotating across the department, again, 4 to 5 plow trucks. I don't know that we have 5 on the road all that often. And again, Dave could correct me, but it does get to a certain manning requirement. You can't call somebody at 10 o'clock at night and said, I know you've never driven a plow truck, but would you be willing to come down and plow our roads? They are obviously very licensed and trained. And so that's just one of the constraints of manning your service department. Police, as you've heard, we man at 24/7, and we practice having 2 policemen on the road in 2 cars 24/7, and that's just in case an issue comes up and one of the police gets tied up. If we only had 1 car, then we don't have coverage potentially as needed. So it's a sound safety practice. Lots of activities surrounding police, the detective work. I will answer a question on the school resource officer, SRO. With benefits, a full-time policeman, and it depends on longevity, but an average total compensation would be a little over 100,000. And the Mayfield schools, it's our policeman. He covers the elementary school, and then from time to time goes out to the environmental center out in along county line there in the north part of the village. And the Mayfield reimburses us about 80% of that of the cost of that police officer. We had long negotiations with them a year ago. They've provided some other aspects that might come to light at a later date that they were willing to consider in exchange for us taking that on. All 5 communities, part of the Mayfield schools, stepped up to the school resource officer. And it turns out that our school resource officer is just doing a wonderful job. And the schools, the students and the parents absolutely love it. It's building quite a positive rapport between police and the students. He's very active in the school and does all kinds of things there to support what's going on over there. So it's really turned out to be a win-win. Fire again, obviously fire. They're responsible for rescue. That's farmed out with the EMS. Obviously, the fire department has to respond to traffic accidents with injuries, fire investigations, and fire inspections. I don't know if everybody, all the residents on this committee are aware, but it behooves you to call Tom and have him come out and inspect your house and see if you have sufficient fire detection devices around. He will offer some up. That's a no charge feature of the village at this point. And he'll check for spots that when he came out to my house, which again is a service that any member of the community can ask for. He happened to mention the dryer vent. And after he left, I checked it and so lo and behold, there was a bird's nest in there, and that can be a real source of fire. So obviously they have to maintain the fire equipment and the public safety education gas well. We have a number of gas wells in the village, and they check the safety of that and deal with any incidents, and a lot of community relation activities. So that's a quick overview. So I'll pause at that point. Go ahead with questions or observations. You're on mute, don't forget.
Yeah, hey, Chip, that reimbursement from the school district, where does that show up as a revenue item?
Who's talking?
I'm sorry, yeah, Chris Howard.
Thank
I
you.
will get off of stop share now.
The income shows up in other income in the general fund.
That's a requirement of government accounting. You'd like to think we'd just have it offset the expense, but that's not how you can do government accounting. So
on the third page, it's in the other revenue in other
Correct.
funds and miscellaneous.
yeah, that would be under your.
I don't know what the third.
Yeah, that's a schedule I put together, but it's not under the, it's under the other funds miscellaneous, which we could break that out, but that's, last year was 328,000 in total, and of that, about close to 80,000 or thereabouts is from the Mayfield schools. And actually, that's probably the big jump between some of the jump between 2018 and 2019. So, other questions, Mary? You see your lips moving. You're on mute.
Okay, am I on unmute now?
You're on unmute. Yes.
Okay, perfect. This question is going to be for Chief and Dave Biggert, because as I'm counting bodies, I know a number of our service department people also act as our volunteer firemen. But my total service department body count is 12. And when I go over to fire and EMS, I have 22 volunteers. So we have 10 people kind of on the payroll as volunteers for the fire department. Do we, Tom and Dave, do we pay them anything, or is there any other expense related to those 10 who are volunteers? I think Scott Magooch might still be one of them, other than just their hourly or their salary for being at a per call basis charge. I'm looking at those 10 people who I don't have any sense of what their expense is. to the village?
Well, Dave, do you want me to address that, or did you want to?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
The service department members that are on the fire department do receive a stipend for their service. And what happens is if there's an emergency during the day, during the week, they will respond to that emergency. They're also able to come in off duty, and then they become a paid on call. Well, with the service department, because they're full-time employees, we can't do paid on call with them. So it becomes basically an overtime issue. So if they come in when they're not working, like we have a call on the weekend, then they would get overtime for that. And we have, I believe, nine full-time members of the service department, and 8 of them are on the fire department.
Okay, there's 8. So I still have 22 volunteer firemen. So there are 14, right? 14 volunteer firefighters that we can call on.
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out what that
Well,
costs.
remember too, though, that Tom and Mike are part of service and fire.
Tom Benjeski.
Yeah, and Mike Feig.
And Dave, you're also part of the fire team, right? Dave Biggert?
Correct. I'm a lieutenant
Okay.
on the fire department.
I guess what I'm trying to do is identify then who's left and what is that? How can we break down what that cost is? Do we give them health insurance? Do we add anything to their, what other costs are involved in those 10 people now?
So those are the remaining people would be non-employee residents, if you will. Like Paul Nemestol is a member. He doesn't work for the village, but he's a member of the fire department.
Okay.
So again, it's a varying number, but I'm sure Janet or Tom can determine, an average or.
Well, I
So someone, okay, go ahead.
I can answer. The paid on call, the POD that you see, the volunteer firefighters are not truly volunteer. They are paid. They're compensated for coming on emergencies. When they respond in for emergencies, they're paid. And then they're also paid when they come in for training. But we don't have any station duty. So they're not there at the firehouse. They respond in from either work or from home. So as you look at the fire department costs, what you see is, I believe, under $200,000 to operate a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week department.
So Mary, the other expenses would be Medicare, which we pay for everybody, Social Security. Almost all of the fire department members are Social Security. I have one that's in a pension plan, and workers' comp costs.
Okay.
And here, quick question. If a service department employee comes in for fire purposes on the weekend, so as you said, that becomes overtime, does that show up as an expense under compensation in the fire department, or does that stay in the service department? That's a call for Janet, I guess.
Well, for the most part, they almost always take comp time.
I see. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, other questions?
Does the village have a building commissioner, or do you outsource that work?
Dave?
No, I'm the building official and the service director. So I perform both duty, and the inspector perform all those duties.
Okay.
That wasn't clear to me. Thank you.
I need to add that to the list here. Yep. Good catch, Susan. Yes. All right, any other questions? Well, again.
Do we provide any school resource officers for Gilmore Academy?
No.
Would there be an opportunity to do so and generate revenue if they were interested?
Well, good question. We haven't explored that. You do have the St. Francis they have a, what, I don't know if it's an elementary school or how far their program goes, but that's another one.
I could just make a couple brief comments on that. I have had very, very preliminary talks with Kathy Kenny, who is the head of the school at Gilmore. It's been probably about a year ago since her and I spoke specifically about that. At that point in time, it was nothing that they were willing to entertain. I would imagine that's something that can be revisited, but as of a year ago, it was nothing that they were interested in doing so.
Okay, thank you.
And one other thing, you had mentioned St. Francis, and St. Francis is, once again, that's a diocese-wide issue. And there was some discussions about possibly doing some sort of security work in there on a part-time basis, but that never came to fruition.
Okay. If there are no other questions at this point, and again, as you keep studying this, the purpose of, you all were sent detail of job descriptions, etc. So I just tried to summarize, but this list of services is meant to be a thought starter for ideas of, if these are the things that we do, what might we want to think about trying to share. So this is the framework for it. I will give you another example that we could get to discuss a little bit, but in the service department, we have some equipment in addition to our plow trucks, and obviously some additional trucks. We have some equipment that we share with other communities, and we have reciprocal with them for some of their equipment. And Dave can talk about that at a later point, but that's another example of things that is already going on as far as sharing. So, and I did want to make one other observation. I think since the 2 minutes after being elected to council several years ago, I immediately got the question, why don't we think about farming out our fire department to save money? And that really becomes a two-edged question. On the one hand, our operating expense is very, very low because it's an on-call function. As Chief just said, it's 200 some thousand of total compensation. The real expense is when you have to do a fire truck. We did face that over the last 2 years, and we spent $450,000 for a new fire truck. We do have one in the 5-year financial outlook. It's a lesser truck. I think it's $250,000 we have in there. I think that's a used truck we're planning on. So how you amortize that, the fire truck we just purchased, it should last at least 20 years. So $450,000 sounds like a lot of money, but spread over 20 years is $22,000 or whatever a year. So, so again, just, we can look at it, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but we might very well find out very quickly that we might cost us money rather than what we currently spend. So,
Chip, on that point, do we know, Chief, how often we're providing supplemental service to the neighboring communities, fire departments, and how often we call on them? And what is the financial arrangement between us and the neighboring communities for sharing fire service?
Okay, I can address that. Mutual aid is a almost like a shared service. We don't charge anyone to come and help them, and no one charges us when they come to help us out. Historically, we have provided mutual aid more times per year than what we receive, which is a good thing because we're not having major calls where we need a lot of help. We probably, and I don't have the figures in front of me, I would say on average, We probably provide mutual aid about 8 to 10 times a year to the surrounding communities. And we, on average, may ask for mutual aid 3 times a year. But it is an agreement. It's actually a statewide, state of Ohio agreement that the departments don't charge each other. So it works out, I think, very well.
Well, I'm not questioning the wisdom of it. I'm just wondering what the finances are. Do we have any sense when we provide mutual aid to another community, what that ends up all in with the overtime and the on-call pay and any additional benefit payments that are incurred? About how much does it cost us per call to provide mutual aid?
I can find that out. It won't be a set number per call because it's
Well, on average.
Based upon how long the call is and how many people respond.
Okay.
All right, we'll add that to our list of questions. Very good. All right, any other questions or comments at this point?
So I have a quick question, and I apologize for not getting this to you sooner.
All right.
Does the village have a list of shared services that you already share with other communities or outsource, or is that list readily available? This is what I'm asking.
Well, obviously dispatch and EMS, which we've cited. Dave, what do you think? Is that something you could put together at some point?
Well, I mean, it's not really, no, the answer to the question is no, we don't have a list. I mean, as far as service department, I mean, if somebody needs something, they call us. And then if it's something we feel we can do or accomplish, then we do it. If it's not, then it's just something we can't, we don't provide. For the most part, I would say our equipment, we really don't have anything that's very unique equipment wise, other than maybe the tree truck and the chipper. And so that tends to, with Chester, be one of the things that they ask for maybe once or twice a year. They have a jet trailer that usually 2 to 3 or 4 times a year we're asking them to borrow. So it's not really a list in what we provide. It's just if someone needs something, we try to talk to each other and see what we can work out together.
So the service department managers don't have then a formal agreement about sharing services. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, we have a mutual aid agreement in place for emergency services, but not really on anything on a day-to-day.
Dave, I'm just wondering on snow plowing, for example. Coming down the hill on Wilson Mills from Mayfield Village, there's a very small piece of that that's in Gates Mills. I mean, would it make sense to expect Mayfield Village just to plow all the way down to River Road? Similarly, on Mayfield, you think about the continuation of Mayfield from the church down to River Road, and on the other side, the continuation from Chesterland down the hill to River Road. Would it make sense to have those two communities, when they're plowing their roads anyway, just continue to cover that section? Similarly on Cedar with Hunting Valley, I don't know what you actually do, but it doesn't seem to me it would make very much sense to have you plowing half of Cedar and Hunting Valley plowing the other half of Cedar. How do we share all that kind of thing?
It's pretty close to what you described. We do Wilson Mills both up and down because there's a point we can turn around and come down. Mayfield Village does village trails for us, so that for that little stretch, we don't have to go down and do one half of, we really kind of already have that. And very often, like County Line will work with Chester. I mean, if we're on it and we can hit both sides, we'll do it, or they'll do it. It depends a little bit on manpower and the storm and all that, but we do already do that.
Okay.
Good question.
Chip, I have another question, just speaking of vehicles and EMS.
Oh, you just hit mute there while you were talking, Debbie.
All right, am I
Good.
unmuted?
You're unmuted, yes.
Okay, and the financials that you have provided us a couple weeks ago or a week or so ago, under the fire department expenditures, there's a $192,000 charge for ambulance EMS, it looks like. Is that the same as that's not the same charge as the charge for the EMS vehicle that we're sharing with Mayfield? Is that an additional vehicle, or what is that $192,000 expense?
That's just for the ambulance runs, and then for that $2,700 payment we're making for a vehicle that they bought.
Oh, it's $192,000 that we pay for the EMS runs?
That's,
Okay.
yeah, our contract is 184.5 with them currently, right, Tom?
That's right.
Maximum.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
And then we also have Mayfield Heights is the backup to Mayfield Village.
Oh, okay.
Get billed by them annually. And then we have a payment now for an apparatus that Mayfield Village purchased. Is that it?
That's, yeah, I was wondering because there was that $184,000 or $5,000 cap with the EMS shared services. So I was wondering what the difference was. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I am going to move on to a quick overview of finances here. Hold on a second. So again, I'll keep it on the screen for a minute. I sent you actually 3 levels of detail. This schedule that's on your screen is a very high level summary, and I'll just hit a couple of quick points. I then I sent you the next page, which I won't dwell on, but that's a little more detail. And then I also sent you each of the departments broken down into even more detail. So so to the extent that you haven't had a chance to look at them, to just keep firing off questions as you look at things. But on this very summary schedule, I just want to highlight a couple of key points. And I've put on 2011 all the way through 2019, and then the 2020 budget, which obviously is pre-COVID. On the real estate taxes, I think it's just very interesting to note that you could put a ruler on that if you graphed it and put a ruler on it, and it's just about 100% level. Almost, varies very little bit, around 2.3 million to 2.4 million. And quite frankly, one of the key reasons for that is that all of that real estate tax comes in through our real estate taxes, which are fixed. So whenever you see us going for a bond renewal or a loan, or I'm forgetting the word, but anyways, a renewal, it doesn't change your tax rate. So the only thing that changes is appreciation or depreciation. If somebody buys a house at greater value than what it used to be on the books for, or let a lower value if we've had any decline in value. So that's really the only variation that you're going to see there. We could, and that's something that the real estate people.
Chip, the purchase price doesn't affect it. It's only when the county does their reappraisals.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Pat, did you get back in? Tom, Pat Jameson needed to get back in. I
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties over here. My apologies.
No, that's all right. That's all right. I just saw you pop up. So, municipal income taxes jump around a bit. And you did see the lag effect, presumably in 2014. I can just tell you, we don't know anybody, obviously, who the individual income taxes are pay, how much anybody pays individually, but you certainly would know that there are some individuals in the village who are, senior executives at public companies, and when they might issue a big or tap in or execute a major stock option, we might get a windfall on that. I think that's what we think happened in 2018. So it can jump around a bit. There's a little bit of volatility that in many cases, as we understand it, a senior executive of a large company might pay their estimated tax. And then as the following year unfolds, their accountant will do very detailed accounting of where they worked at any point in time. And, and that may actually generate a credit, but how it hits our books can vary by a year. So the number's pretty volatile. We try to forecast and straight line it a bit. So, but overall, you'd be hard pressed to say that it's really gone up all that much. And the other income, there's again a lot of detail. I just summarized it on this. There's detail on the next schedule. Again, the school resource officer, as an example, would be in that. The fundraising that we did for Marston Park, we brought in over 100,000 on that. Plus, we got a grant money, so that shows up on some of that. On the other income line, I've chosen, and to just keep this simple and have netted some things out. For example, the revenue that we get in for the land conservancy, I have simply offset that money comes through. We keep 5%, 95% goes to the land conservancy. So I just have the 5% in this other, as part of this other income line. So it has jumped around a little bit, but if you look at the summary of 2011, 5,185,000, this does not include any inheritance tax. So 5,185,000, and in 2019, 5,278,000. So pretty flat. Obviously, that's about 100,000 higher, but some of that was one-time unusual, and we brought it back down for budget purposes for this year, for 2020, and it's probably going to be lower than that given COVID. So operating expense, I've shown this in a slightly different way, just personnel related. And again, we're giving pay increases about 2.5. I don't know that we've done 3%, maybe one or more of those years, but 2011, $1,899,000, 2019, $1,907,000. So I know as council and as administration of the village, we feel that we've done a very good job of trying to keep our expenses as flat as possible. Obviously, we've downsized in a couple of spots, and feel basically very good about tightly managing the personnel. The healthcare and pension gone from, again, I'm just comparing 2011 to 2019, but has gone up, and we certainly know that in our economy that hits us. And it's a pretty high percent of relative to salaries, higher than what I see in the business world, but that's just the nature of some of the public employee pension funds, et cetera. So I break out salt and aggregate. It jumps around a lot. We try to budget prudently for it. So we budgeted a high amount for 2020. Whether we end up spending that will depend on how bad the season is. But you can tell in 2017, we had a very low year. That was not only a very mild winter, but the price for salt was very, very low. Several of you asked how we how we, how we out or how we come up with, contracting for things like salt. Salt would be an example. We're part of a statewide, I think it's statewide program. Dave, you want to comment about our salt contracting?
Yeah, we participate in the state of Ohio cooperative purchasing program with salt. So each year, we when we get contacted by the state, we try to determine how much we're going to need for the year, and then we submit that total tonnage to the state. We've already done that for the upcoming season, and I believe they're currently bidding it right now. So they will compile all the multiple cities, county, school districts who participate in the program, including the state purchase for salt. They go out and they bid it because it's such a large quantity. And then I believe around September, we find out who the supplier will be and at what price.
And just to supplement that, with the tonnage that we commit to, we have to buy at least 90% and could buy as much as 110%. A couple of years ago,
that's correct. Yep.
That very mild winter of 2017, we actually had to pay for some storage of salt because it was a very, very low year. And I don't remember which year, Dave, but since I've been involved with you, we had a year where we actually had to go buy some additional salt off contract, so to speak. I think it was maybe 100 tons or something, but we got real low at one point. So, so we look at our history and the weather patterns, et cetera. Interestingly, underneath the salt, as you may all experience in our village, Susan Renda, you may not, I don't know what Moreland Hills does, but we mix aggregate in with our salt to lessen how much salt we use. And quite frankly, recently, for whatever reason, the cost of aggregate has gone up. And so this past winter, we actually increased our percent of salt relative to aggregate. And it turns out as the snow melted, we had obviously less stones on the road, and that helped with a little bit of cleanup. So it's just, but if aggregate ever gets back to a very low rate, we'll have to go back to mixing the salt in with the aggregate. But I don't know if you wanted to add any further comment on that, Dave.
No, no.
Okay. General insurance, we actually, that number could have gone up even more because of flood insurance. We've chosen this year, I believe, Janet can maybe correct, but we've chosen to, some of the buildings, we just thought the probability of actually experiencing a flood was very, very low, and the price for flood insurance was getting to be rather exorbitant. So you want to comment on general insurance, Janet?
Property and casualty remains pretty flat through the years. It's just been the flood insurance that's been causing all the problems.
And as you can imagine, the service garage where the fire trucks are and the lower level of town hall is all in the floodplain. And now, does the post office, do they have to buy their own? I assume do they have to buy their own insurance?
No.
We insure that?
Yes.
Okay, so obviously the post office building as well. So now the interesting thing when I put this together, when you just lump all the other non-personnel, and we could give you infinite detail on this, I quite frankly double checked my number for our budget for 2020. Why we popped at almost 200,000, 190,000, and it's actually spread throughout several departments that all had meaningful needs. And I'd have to break out some of the other things that have gone on in there of expenses. But it started out at $1.5 million in 2011. It got as low as a little below $1.4 million, and has climbed up to $1.6 million, and then budgeted for 2020 at $1.8 million. Now, as you might have been tracking, a couple of council meetings ago, we started to to dig in or asked to dig into the, sort of relook at the budget given the COVID and likely impact. And the department heads have embarked on postponing or cutting out anything that's just non-essential. So where we actually end up this year, I presume that number might end up being a little lower than what was budgeted. So, but again, you may have further questions there, and there's all kinds of detail in the subsequent schedule and in the detail by department if you wanted to look at that. So, and then capital expenditures. Again, notice the fire truck hitting in 2018 and 19, that was spread across 2 years. Without a major, that again was 450,000, maybe, I don't know quite what it was between the 2 years. I think maybe, I don't know, but well, just maybe 225 in each of those two or something. But if you take that away and then you looked at our 5-year, I don't have the 5-year dropped in here for going forward, but we're pretty much budgeting, it's going to be in this range of 800,000+. Again, I apologize, I don't have the 5-year in front of me, but we have to get plow trucks every so often. Every year we replace one of our police cars. And that might be one thing that we're going to want to benchmark is how many miles do other municipalities put on their police cars? Did they run them more than we do? Is that worth the risk or not? Because you don't want a police car or a plow truck breaking down on the road. Obviously it can happen, but you don't want to push to that limit very often. So now again, that's all vehicles, and then the roads are obviously the principal other expense in there. Road repair, mill and fill work that we do, and the work on if we have to repair any of the culverts and things like that. So just as a little side note, we included in 2019 was the expenditure, our share of doing Cedar Road. And we had been staring at the Cedar Road issue. We own half of it, so to speak, from Woodstock up to Somme Center. And Hunting Valley has the other half. And then a little bit east of Woodstock is still shared, but then the rest of it is Hunting Valley. We were both looking at it and knew it had to be redone, and it was going to be a very major expenditure. And then we reached out to the county. They came out and looked at it. They had a specific program to deal with situations like that, and they stepped up and covered 90% of the expense. So I guess they covered 80 and we had 10 and Hunting Valley had 10. So I think that cost us 160 or 170,000 as opposed to almost having to spend close to $1 million to do it. So, but that was an extra expenditure for that one. And it's now probably our nicest road in the village. So now one final point, and this will get to a summary comment about our expense and revenue structure. If you look at that inheritance tax that was terminated in about 2012, I believe.
2013.
2013. And so you still had some estates getting wrapped up through 2014. But you can see that in its heyday, and obviously it would depend on the specifics, but $1.3 million in 2011. And if you went back before that, there were some $1 million years then. So I'm going to quickly just go to the ending cash balance of all funds. And if you look at 2011, 4.6 million, and 2019, we finished at 4.9 million. Having lost the inheritance tax, again, I think as a council and a mayor and a staff, we feel very, very proud of managing our expenses and our ending cash. We think very prudently. We seem to have hit the tipping point where we're now in deficit outlook. But even after losing all of that inheritance tax, we've managed to stay essentially slightly cash positive through the past 8 years. But those days are over. And what we learned in some work we did last year, a group of us, on looking at the master plan process, when you study a lot of other communities, and I might ask Susan Renda to weigh in if she's willing quickly. we get almost no revenue from commercial. And that's one of the reasons that you really don't see our real estate and municipal tax base changing much, because it's so hard and we don't, very hesitant, obviously, to raise taxes on the residents. Typically with commercial, it's a little easier to pass through. Plus, you tend to see the commercial world may grow in size and particularly in better economic times. So in the past, that wasn't as big an issue because we had a strong another leg of revenue coming in with inheritance tax, but we've lost that. And so, and one of the summary comments from one of you was spot on, that we are totally dependent, basically about 99% dependent as a village on our residents now to fund us. And if we start pricing our way out of things, by raising our taxes more than the communities around us, whoever, the competing communities, when people look to move in, then we're going to start a downward slide. So the tax committee will presumably show where we really stand competitively and come up with what their assessment of what they think would happen if we had to raise taxes. There's certainly a possibility. I don't think we can cut expenses our way back to balanced budget, but anything we can come up with in this committee and anything that other revenue outlook can come up with would help to dent, so to speak, how much, if any, we have to go for a tax increase. So the loss of that inheritance tax, we've managed to, we just mill and fill our roads. We haven't repaved a major road from top to bottom in many years. I think maybe Gates Mills Boulevard might have been the last one that we did a major redo. But so we're continuing to mill and fill and evaluate, well, obviously, other than what we did on Cedar. But so that's just a brief overview. I would have you note that the total debt of the village went from 6.2 million to 80,000 and will be paid off all but 19,000 in 2020. So some of that, but of course, a lot of that was the water system that was put in 20 years ago. And we were charging the residents. It was baked into the real estate taxes to pay off for the water system. So that is worth noting that a lot of residents have seen their real estate tax bill decline between 2018 and 2020 with the payoff of the water system. So long-winded on that. I'll open up for questions. I'll take this chart off.
Chip, my real uncertainty goes to, you talk about not having much commercial property in the village, but in the village itself, the commercial operators, how are our leases structured in terms of what we provide in terms of uncompensated services versus what they're responsible for reimbursing us for work we do? I'm thinking of the service department, they're over there planting flowers and mowing lawns. I'm thinking of the water that we provide. I'm thinking of the insurance. We were just told that one of our tenants, being the post office, doesn't pay insurance but we do. What's the situation on these leases? Is there a uniform approach on a client by client basis?
Well, I personally have not gotten into any of those leases. And I'm not sure if the other revenue subcommittee is going to look at those leases.
They are going to look at the leases, some of which come up for renegotiation within the next 12 months or so. I think maybe Dave could address the what you referred to as uncompensated services, which many of which I'm not familiar with. And Dave, maybe you can talk about what our obligations are under the lease and what we do.
Well, before we get to Dave, let me interject that we do have
Yeah.
common area charges. When Jerry Tone was on council, he actually set up the leases and all that across the street. Some of them pay for the common area fees in their leases, one kind of price or one price covers it all kind of a deal. And then some of them, Janet quarterly has to figure them out. And they all have water separate and they all have electric separate. And then, right, they all have their own electric meter? Janet, I'm looking.
I don't think so for water.
Okay,
And what
then you
about
figure
sewer?
it on a percentage? Janet,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
then you figure it on a percentage? I thought the water was, and then you figure the sewer on a percentage.
No, the sewer, for the ones that I bill is based on an ordinance that was passed in 2002. That's either $50 a quarter or $6.56 per 100 cubic feet of water used, something along those lines. But SARA's pays a fixed amount for sewer. And then when I get the common area expense money back that I've billed out, then I have to go back and pull up all those expenses individually and credit them.
Well, what I'm really wondering is, talk about services that we provide. All of those buildings are buildings that are lessees. And we provide, one way or another, we provide water, we provide sewer, we provide power, heat, and the external service stuff that Dave's group does in terms of lawn mowing and planting flowers and maintenance for all of that, including the post office on our side of the street. But I've never had the sense that there is any uniform basis for recovering from all of those various tenants, those kinds of.
Well, Janet, they keep track of their hours and then Janet has a chart where she figures that out and it gets put into the common area charges. You know, if the service department is over there doing whatever it is, there's a chart for that actually, that they've put in so many hours this month. I think it's by month, isn't it, Janet?
I track it by pay.
By pay cycle?
By pay period.
By pay period.
I don't use that for doing common area expenses though.
No, but we track, well.
Every lease is different, basically.
Right.
Okay, so again, I don't want to get too detailed. I think it's, there's some validity to this. We obviously get revenue. It shows up on the rental income line. And then we have expenses. And as you said, various leases are coming up and the other revenue committee is looking at some things. I know there's a real estate committee. So I don't want to drop the issue, but I'm not sure, you'd like to have a whole complete picture. Just something I think we need to kick around and see if this.
There's definitely room for improvement from that standpoint of charges, I think.
Right.
As these leases come up.
And I guess, Tim, it is a sort of straddles several subcommittees, so maybe something we just need to figure out how we might want to address it, because I think it's a valid set of questions. So.
Right. No, I completely agree. And as I said, the other revenue subcommittee will be looking at the leases. In the past, and this could change if the mayor chose to, it's been, I believe, the purview of the real estate committee to manage those leases. And I think that as we learn more about them and the other revenue subcommittee and as they get discussed here for that matter, I think some direction can be given to the real estate committee as to precisely how we want to manage them. And
it's a problem for Janet too with this common area thing. It'd be nice to come up with some sort of a different way so that she doesn't have to do all this quarterly stuff, then get the money and then reapply it to the, it's time consuming.
Well, and to Les's point, I think it should be as much, these were all done at different times over the years, but to the extent that we can get a standard lease agreement, it simplifies.
They're just going to start next year, actually coming. Most of them were in Sean's time, and before Sean, it was Jerry Tone that started the whole thing.
Yeah, so I think there's good work to be done there to get these overtime consistent and ensure that our expenses are fully reflected in the lease.
All right. That was, again, the financial overview at a summary level. Any other questions or comments on the village financial picture?
Yeah, Chip, the sales tax revenue from Sarah's Place or the Hunt Club, does the village get any of that?
What kind of tax is it?
He's saying the sales tax, and the answer to that is indirectly yes, but that's a state sales tax, some of which ends up getting shared. And I can't remember what the mechanism is. Does it come through the shared fees from the state?
Well, from the state, we get the local government fund.
Right, that's what I meant.
I don't think that includes, I don't know that that's a part of sales tax. Do you, Susan?
Oh, you're on mute, Susan.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I
That's
didn't
a
think so.
separate issue.
Yeah. And then the only other things we get from the state are the permissive license tax and the gas excise tax.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question, there's a line item on Chip's summary, share of sales and state taxes.
About 50,000, 55,000.
Yeah, 50,000 a year, and yet back in 2011, 2012, 2013, it was higher than that.
Well, I certainly know the government has cut back on money that they've been sending to the state government, but I don't know what goes on in that detail.
Yeah, I think what we
I think that one actually, that's where it should be, the local government fund, because that's what was cut. So
yeah.
I think that sales tax maybe shouldn't be part of that line because that's not correct.
That may have been me doing something.
But yeah, that would be the local government fund cuts.
So Susan, how does a community, do you remember from Moreland Hills, how does a community get reimbursed for the sales tax that the commercial entities generating in Moreland Hills, for example?
So it wasn't exactly sales tax that we got reimbursed for, and it's like some sort of use fee that, especially like the country club, we got reimbursed for license. I'll have to look back and let you know the exact terminology, but so with the restaurant, we got payments directly from their income taxes. And then there was a fee on top of that. And I'll have to look back and tell you what that was.
Okay. All right. Other questions? All right, then I'm just going to do a quick highlight of some of the comments and questions that many of you have raised. Hold on here a second. I'll put the page up and if you don't have it in front of you, I'll just zip through very quickly. I've attempted to group them here. So again, I've talked with Tim and Janet and the mayor about how can we get answers to these. I don't want to dwell on it because we could spend a couple of hours going through all the myriad of
You
questions
could.
here. But we do have the village-owned buildings. We just talked about that topic, and it really deals with both the lease and then some of the expenses. Obviously, from year to year, there can be major things, repairing a roof or having to do the furnace or something in one of the buildings. So some of the volatility is just some of the major things you have to do. But that one question, maybe Janet, you can answer. Does the library reimburse the village for any services provided by the service department? What is the relationship of the library building with the Cuyahoga County Library?
We really don't have, I mean, Dave maybe can add to this, but if it's less than $500 a year, if we have any expenses related to the library, I think they just take care of their own.
And I know that the citizens paid for the building, and then the library. So technically, the village doesn't own the building, or I don't know, how did that all work as far as the residents?
So we own the building. We own the building, but take care of basically the inside themselves. And really, I would say the only real services that we provide inside the building, because we are the owners and shoveling of the walk and whatnot.
I see. Okay. All right. So we've got insurance on here. The comment on health insurance, I think, was something. Again, I'll break this down, and we may talk on 5 or 10 of these topics at our next meeting. And I think health insurance would be a good one to just cover how we've been handling it in the past. Obviously, and then you have your not just health insurance, but your whole pension aspect in there. So my thinking is that we'll knock off some of these in specifics rather than just hitting them free form on today's meeting. So
let me just ask on when we get to insurance.
Who's that?
You're moving papers around, Les.
I can't hear him.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is something that small businesses, as some of your committee members probably know, have shared insurance expenses in order to get group rate.
We totally lost you, Les.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I don't know why you're coming in and out, but and then there's a lot of scuffling. So
yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm really wondering whether or not there are any economies to be achieved by sharing insurance with multiple communities surrounding us.
Meaning you think it might be cheaper if we didn't, or because I think
we did.
Okay.
If we did, if we got group insurance for multiple communities.
I'm not sure if we aren't already doing that. Tim, do you recall? Or Janet?
We have in the past evaluated a Cuyahoga County insurance plan, but we put our health insurance plan out to bid every year. And right now, I think we've got one that covers just us, and the Cuyahoga County regional health insurance had never been economic. We've also had conversations in the past with other communities about taking a self-insurance approach to health insurance. And again, when you looked at how you have to structure that so that it's prudent.
I guess, Tim, I'm wondering, beyond health insurance, whether we've ever looked at a group property and casualty insurance approach.
At least for us at those.
Good question.
To be honest, Les, I don't know if that would be available. And I would want to be very careful about the group I got into, depending on what their property, and then what their risks were.
We
Well, I'm
did look
thinking
2
about the
years
valley.
ago. We did look 2 years ago, Tim. I don't know if you remember when we looked at, there's a group plan that a lot of them are in, but once they're in it, they can't get out of it.
Yeah, you're committed to it.
And once you're out of it, if you have something that comes up from years before when you were in it, they won't cover it. So.
Moreland joined a consortium at one point for health insurance, and it was really a bad experience. Like Janet said, once we were in it, we couldn't get out of it easily, and it ended up being hugely expensive, and it was really bad. So you have to be very cautious about going into those kinds of things, I think.
Yeah, I'm certainly not opposed to taking a look at what's available and whether or not it's economic. Les, I guess what I'd say is that when we've done that in the past, it didn't look attractive to us.
Right. And we just did that 2 years ago with our property and casualty. That's when we looked at it.
Yep.
Okay, just to hit some of the highlights of some of the other questions, a lot of questions about ambulance, EMS, and dispatch. I can tell you that right now they are, the staff is evaluating a new contract with Mayfield Village on EMS. So they're looking at that from that perspective.
Can you tell us, Chip, on EMS, what everybody else is doing around us? What's Willoughby Hills doing? What's Mayfield Village doing other than sharing with us? What's Chesterland doing? What's Hunting Valley doing in terms of EMS?
Well, again, we can, you'll see that I've got this EMS and dispatch and fire, whether we want to tackle that as one of the teams and ask some of that more specifically, whether we think that's even fertile ground or not. So, well, I'm hesitant on the time. I wanted to try to finish in an hour and a half here, but so I'm not dismissing your question. I guess.
Well, I could speak to that. We're negotiating a contract with Mayfield Village at the moment. You asked about Willoughby. They have the chief, Tom can speak to this too. They have their own ambulance. Mayfield Village has their own. Mayfield Heights has their own. Chesterland has their own. Tom could speak to other ones. Russell has their own, and theirs is similar to ours as far as fire. As far as EMS, I'm not sure on that one, hour-wise or how they run it. Maybe Tom can speak to that. Tom, are you?
I don't really have a proposal on this. I'm simply thinking that if we're supposed to be looking at shared services, that is obviously a major shared service where we've dealt with one particular community, and have we really negotiated with the others?
Well, we've looked at them over at different periods of time, and again, Tom can speak to that. Most weren't interested in taking on another community. Let's say it that way.
I think it's a bit of a valid question. Obviously, since we're in negotiations, I don't know if we want to talk more about that or have a little subgroup.
Well, we can bring something back at the appropriate time. I don't know that I can say much more than we're trying to negotiate a contract right now.
Right.
Of course, if we negotiate a contract, then there's not much for us to do because it'll all be over.
Well, yes, but we're also very satisfied with the service that we get from a standpoint of time to time to the need, I'll put it that way, like time to, from their station to our residents and or accidents on our roads. So to me, time is of the essence when you got an emergency. As soon as we start going to other places, we're adding to that quality time.
Well,
Put it
you
that
you
way.
made a
I can't really hear him.
You can't hear me?
No,
Not
every time
really.
you talk, I don't know if you're shuffling paper or something, but we get
No,
static.
I'm not shuffling anything.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
like
just-
something is rubbing up against the microphone. Is your hand on the laptop
No,
while you're talking?
no.
Okay.
I'm simply saying that time is something we've experienced, but I don't know what they do in Hunting Valley, and I don't know what they do in Chesterland, but I can't imagine that the time would be much different than it is from Mayfield Village.
Hunting Valley contracts with Chagrin Falls, so actually it would be much longer. I can
Okay.
tell you that for sure.
Okay.
And again,
Now,
when we get to benchmarking, that might be one of those areas we want to look at is what each community is spending on EMS as an example and on fire.
That's a possibility.
Dispatch, you know, it comes up from time to time when they looked at the village council looked at dispatch 6 or 7 years ago. It appeared very clear that that would be beneficial to get out of dispatch and join the regional. So just we can evaluate if we want to revisit that. You know, on the one hand, everybody thinks, well, there's people sitting at town hall 24/7 as far as the police coverage.
Actually, Susan, I can't see her, but I know she's out there.
Right.
Could speak to that better than anybody because she was actually part of the original group that got the 8 together to begin with. 8 communities together with dispatch.
Right. And not only is dispatch a personnel issue, but the equipment that it takes to get started up is just overwhelming. It's really hugely expensive. And so we started with 8 communities, and I think there are about 30 now for Chagrin Valley Dispatch. So and the expenses haven't gone up for dispatch over the years because it's continued to expand. Now, that won't last forever, but it's a highly skilled position. So you want the best people. So you don't want to just take anybody and put them in that position. And the equipment is really incredible. It's expensive, and it continues to get more and more specific, and which becomes more expensive then. And so, you know, you can look at it certainly, but that's not an area that I would think you could save any money anyway.
Yep, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Really?
I'm presuming that these lists are questions that either the committee or people outside the committee have presented to you. And having read through them, I know that we already know the answers or are pretty knowledgeable on a lot of these subjects.
Oh, right.
Might I suggest, because I think we're going to get bogged down in every bullet point, and I don't know that we can really do that tonight. If we already have, like as Karen was pointing out, we have really done our homework with EMS over the years. But might I suggest that if we have a pretty good feel for where we stand on some of these bullet points, that we present those answers to you, and you can send them out to the whole committee so that they know. In other words, I think we're kind of reinventing the wheel and spending a lot of time talking about things that we already have the answers to. And I want obviously the whole committee to appreciate that we have some backup information on this and we've made the decisions that we have. But I don't know that we're going to get very far through this bullet point list tonight and have it be an effective meeting. So I wonder, maybe I'll ask for everybody, is there a way we can address some of these, share the information we already have, like the work we've done on EMS up to this point, so that we bring everybody up to speed, so we're not wasting time looking at things we've already pretty well figured out?
Well, I will just, I wasn't intending, I agree as we're going through, I just wanted to kind of point some things out, but I agree with you, Mary. It's very tough. I have asked others how we ought to address this. I'm not personally going to go through and answer all of these questions. I know some answers. So I haven't gotten a clear sense of how we're going to answer a lot of these questions and versus doing more research. So I just have to leave it open, as I was trying to suggest. Maybe we'll tackle some of them in the next meeting. Maybe some we can, you know, write some responses on some of these. And I agree with you. I didn't want to get the meeting bogged down. I just didn't want to ignore the list. What I was gonna, and I've already allowed that to happen, and I apologize. I appreciate the comment on dispatch, and that's helpful because I don't know that we do want to spend time as a committee digging into something that might not be very fruitful. So,
We're the envy of a lot of communities that are not part of our dispatch, wouldn't you say, Susan?
Absolutely.
It's pretty unbelievable. We have a really unbelievably fine dispatch center.
Yes, nationally recognized.
I could just, Tom, maybe you can help me with this, because I know, to kind of reinforce what Susan had, I know a big driving force of why we did that was we had to rebuild our dispatch if we were going to do it internally. And I thought the number was between $700,000-800,000 in new radio equipment. So as Susan said, it's an extremely expensive proposition.
And constantly changing technology. That's a big expense.
So in other words, we could summarize what we already know about why we went to dispatch, so that we're not spending a lot of time re-looking at it, and we can move further down Chip's list of things that we can maybe address, you know, with a different set of eyes.
and I totally agree with you, Mary, and I'm trying to carefully balance not getting into every dot point. On the other hand, the fact that we've just had this discussion on dispatch, at least my take is at the moment, maybe not spend a lot of time as a committee on that and see what else we can dig in on. So, so it's just it's a careful balance here. I'm not, you know, I don't view my role as to just thank everybody for their questions. Now, here's what you're going to all do. I'm trying to make this collaborative and everybody's thoughts based on looking at all the information. I like a lot of the questions tonight. But try to also summarize what I think I'm hearing here. So I think what I've just heard is, I don't know that we ought to put dispatch on the list. I don't think the committee, the members of the committee should be the ones to go out and see if other communities are interested. I think that should be something that Karen and perhaps I and perhaps some other council people would go out and talk to some of the other communities about what level, how much interest they might have. And maybe some of us should do that on EMS as an example and report back to this committee on what it might be. I think at this point, I think there's some fertile ground and certainly in benchmarking. I think a lot of questions have come up since even our attempt at meeting last Wednesday on water and wastewater. I don't know what our water expense, it's, you know, the bill that's on here for water is the net amount for, I guess I'd have to say it's the net amount of what we're still paying off on the loan relative to the revenue we're getting in. I haven't dug into that number. The wastewater cost is definitely one that bugs me, and I think something we might want to look at.
I know other revenues was talking about that the other day too.
I think there's room for both committees in that
Yeah.
area. I
Well,
really do.
water, the only thing coming out of the water account is, it was payment of loans. And now, I think the only thing left is the wastewater loan.
All right, and again, I've tried to
I mean,
summarize.
there's really nothing coming out of water, and we're not a utility. So those were basically there to fund the loans. It takes in tap-in fees, and it was taking in the special assessments. So if there's work that needs to be done, now with the loans done, and Dave and I have talked about this, the water main lines are ours, and that's something we need to be considering in the future, because if a big expense comes up to repair something there, there's nothing funding that water account right now other than some small tap-in fees. Wastewater, the expenses there, we get the water bill every month for down there. And we pay for the county inspections, and we have a couple loan payments left. The daily inspections are what cost us the most.
That's right.
Right. And I think given the
If I could just talk real
Go ahead, Dave.
quick. When we get to wastewater, we keep calling it inspections. It's not inspections. They operate and maintain the facility as far as the wastewater treatment plant. We only own it by name and by permit. They are the operating body of it, though. So somehow we've gotten on this track to keep saying it's just inspections. It's not. They operate the sewage treatment plant for us.
Dave, is that something, the cost of doing that 200 and some thousand a year, is there a way to attack that, so to speak? See if there's ways to.
It's more like 180 a year, 187, 185.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll have to kind of research it a little bit. If I recall, and I wasn't here when the plant was built, when the project was, I wasn't with Gates Mills when the project was done, but I recall in conversations, again, we are the owner and we hold through the Ohio EPA the permit to operate it. And EPA mandates someone, either a staff member or I think the only other option is a community, or not a community, the county, to provide maintenance and operation services. I don't believe the EPA, because it is a semi-public facility, allows a party to be the operation and maintenance. So it either has to be staff and a backup staff, or they take the county sanitary engineers as an alternate. So again, the costs fluctuate because it depends on if we have to replace a pump or, maintenance work or whatever. So there is a little bit of fluctuation in that. And that's why you see those numbers can escalate. But they don't just perform the inspection, they completely operate that facility.
Now, that's raising some questions in my own mind. Who all you taps into the wastewater system?
I think we should go back to when this started, okay? The EPA mandated that we put in a wastewater treatment plant because the community house, the town hall, the service buildings, and the post office at that time failed. And we didn't do anything about it for years, and they finally said, you're doing it. It's pretty much how it happened. Then after we had that, then we could look to redo across the street. We had no alternative but to put that station in, how it was done. We allowed for extra capacity so that we could develop across the street. Did I get that right, Dave?
Correct. And we still have some capacity. So if you say if you ask what's all tied in, it's all our buildings, town hall buildings, the garages, the community buildings tied into it, the post office, library, Mills building, and St. Christopher's Church is tied into it.
And the wash house.
I believe
and the wash house.
And the wash house. Yep.
But
and
those
the two
are all our
houses
buildings, and we had to do it. We did not have a choice.
What is the age of the plant? Is it going to be upgraded? with an EPA grant and work more efficiently?
don't know
Well,
about that.
again, I mean, fortunately, it's not operating at capacity on a daily basis. I believe it was in 2002, I believe it was completed. I'd have to check on that though.
I wasn't sure if it was antiquated from, decades ago or something like that.
No.
No, because we have a few years ago, the one thing that I would say was antiquated, we added an ultraviolet because we were having problems with the E. coli. The EPA standard had changed a few years ago and we were having problems meeting that requirement. So, we update the equipment as things change or are needed.
Well, okay, so again, not to address everything, but it is a very major expenditure. I hear you, all
Yes,
your
it is.
constraints, Dave, on what, regulatory wise or what are required. I just not sure if a sub team digging in a bit, looking at other communities that have a wastewater plant, what they experience, see if there's any fertile ground, so to speak, of ways. Aaron's question about, what drives the expense, technology changes all the time. Is there ways to upgrade that would result in having less manpower requirements or whatever? I don't know. But just it's 180, 200,000 that hits us, and that's pretty major expense.
The question came from the other committee too. Is there a chance that it could be bid out to a private contractor to service it every day? That was on
That was Larry's committee.
Larry's.
Because again,
Yeah.
Well, that wouldn't be a Larry committee question. It's one I think we ought to look at because it's an expense, but
No, but it came up there and he's going to send it to you.
yeah, well, that's fine because I agree. And certainly kind of embedded in some of our questions because it jumps out. So, and I hear your question or comment about water. So, I share Mary's point about, there's a whole lot of things in here that we can answer. Talking it through, some interesting things come up, but so I won't dwell on all the questions that much more. I did include an overall observation from one of the committee members. I'm not trying to attribute any one of these to any one person, but I thought it was a great summation that our real question is going to perhaps be on the revenue side, but it's not that I don't think we should be trying to turn over every stone we can. So I guess what I'd like to do and not have this meeting go on much longer is see what we ought to do, subdivide here into some teams. I'd like to have a benchmarking team. I've already talked with Susan about her willingness to participate. Again, she'd maybe done a little bit of this and has a perspective from Moreland Hills. Stefan Schaefer had some experience with this when he was up at Michigan, and has a strong financial background. I think it could be an effort that may require one additional, I think a team of 3 would be good.
They would also have to be public meetings.
Good.
Really, 2 or 3 people would be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Susan's used to that.
I'd like one other volunteer. Who else would like to dig in on the process of setting up, I think brainstorming on benchmarks and then approaching other communities and their willingness to provide data? Do I have any other volunteers or do I have to assign somebody? Well, let's go through a couple of others. I think the police department, looking at how we staff it and whether there might be opportunities to split some time with other communities, maybe just looking at the whole staffing, which is very complex, obviously, trying to do it 24/7 and when you have call offs and how we do our part-time people, and what other communities face, and just see what if there's any grounds there, you know, if it ended up saving one police officer or the equivalent of a half of one, that's, you know, 50 or 100,000 a year. So I'd like to have a team dig into that a bit. I'm thinking that Debbie or Mary, I mean, maybe that's something that you would.
Yeah, I used to be on the safety committee. I think I chaired it for a couple of years. So I'd be very happy to work with Chief Greg on looking at the police department. And I'm happy to do EMS because I spent a lot of time with the mayor negotiating that and
Months.
dealing with Ed on you know, the whole ambulance situation. So I'll do ambulance EMS and I'll do the police department.
All right.
If Greg will have me.
Be my honor.
Thank you.
I would like to propose that the service department does a variety of things throughout the year, and how, you know, and it breaks down into the specialties, and you know, you don't, if you have to go do some tree work, you don't just, it's not just next man up. There's some that have tree experience. There's some that have, you know, just expertise in different areas. Certainly maintenance is a whole separate area. So I guess I'd like a group to, you know, to look at that. I don't think looking at how we staff the fire department is very fertile ground, because we just don't spend very much there. And I don't think we need a whole lot of people looking at how Janet and a half a person do the admin function. So I'm just going across looking at where we spend our money. And again, I'm not picking on these because I think there's fertile ground necessarily, but I think it'd be helpful as a subcommittee for the teams to come back and report that, you know, this is how service department staff, these are all the different skills. This is the requirements over time. As I mentioned, I think the snow plowing is a key factor. Obviously, you know, all the summertime activities that they have to do. Just to come back with an analysis of how the department's staffed and all the activities that they do. So, Les, would you be interested in taking on the service department? Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Les.
We've shamed him into muting because when he talks, you can't hear him.
So Dave is a pretty formidable.
Was that a yes? Aaron, what are your thoughts? Where would you like to dig in? Oh, you're on mute. Here, I might be able to unmute. I'll unmute you, Dave.
I think for me, the service department would be the most beneficial for me to contribute.
Great. All right. I'll put you there. Chris, Howard, where would you like to dig in?
I'd like to work with Mary on her committees.
Dr. Howard.
The fact that you guys live a couple of doors away is convenient, but again, it has to be a public meeting. So.
Stand in the middle of Epping Road.
That's right. Debbie, I'm just jumping around here. Debbie, where would you like to dig in?
You're on mute, Debbie. Hey, Deb, there we go.
I'd be happy to work with Mary on either one of her committees.
All right, that'll be 3 on that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you both.
And obviously you guys will involve, as far as police, you'll work with Greg, and with fire or DMS, you'll work with Tom on those sub aspects. So Pat, what would you like to dig in on?
Chip, wherever you need me, I think I could help with the benchmarking piece. Service department would be interesting, but really wherever any of them would be good for me.
Um, why don't you dig in on service? Anthony Borovica, he's a finance director at Poly One, and I'm thinking the benchmark piece. Yeah, I think that's where he focuses. I think that would be a good mix of that skill set, if that's all right with you.
That's perfect. Sounds good.
Okay, so benchmarking. Stefan, again, are you willing to focus on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to get to, I will reach Anthony at some point here. I did try to call his cell, but again, I think he's on vacation, but I'll let you know when I've reached him. But can you
Okay.
coordinate with Susan and get going on it, the two of you? And again, I think, map out your plan of attack, so to speak, your work plan. I will touch base with the two of you and let me know. I'll try to attend each of these as you guys get together. I think one-on-one discussions, I don't know, what, under the sunshine law, how do we, if Stefan wants to talk to Susan, Tim, that's just one-on-one discussion. Is that a public meeting or?
Yeah, it's the majority of that committee.
Well, wait a minute. These aren't committees. These are like, Janet, let's you and I talk about this, because I think that I am all for transparency, and I absolutely want to make sure we're following the law. But it seems to me in some of these efforts, it is it's majority of them are not elected officials. They're analyzing operations and then reporting to the committee.
To the subcommittee, yes.
So let's talk about how we can structure this so it's both transparent and also follows the law.
Okay, we'll have to ask Todd.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah. So I'm
But
going
with
to.
those groups being so small, they could meet in person at the community house.
Well, that's a possibility. And
And
so, but that's my point. Let's structure this so it isn't unwieldy, and we don't have Tom permanent techie for 1,000 meetings, because this could really explode.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah. So let's structure it correctly so that we're following the law, that people have, that it's transparent, but it doesn't become unwieldy.
And for everything else, Janet just mentioned a gentleman by the name of Todd. He's our law director. So we'll pose the question to him, and then we'll proceed with his, with his guidance.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I will get back. I'll send out a email to everybody on the answer to that, whether Stefan and Susan can just start having some conversation, or whether we have to call that a public meeting. I'm sure hope we don't have to, not because we're not trying to be transparent, but we're not doing anything policy wise. We're just doing some background fact gathering and trying to analyze things. So and then come back to the subcommittee, which obviously will be open. So
It gets hard for me to get my hands on all the public records too. So
right. Yeah, exactly.
Of course. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that at all prior to this call. So all right. So that's the benchmarking team. Service is Chris Howard, Aaron Kramer.
No, Chris Howard volunteered for
police.
EMS.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading
Police
across.
and EMS.
It's Les Jacobs that's service, and Aaron working with Dave Biggert.
And Pat.
And I'm sorry, I had a schedule here and I didn't fill out very well. And Pat, absolutely. So
who's EMS?
Mary, Tom, Chris Howard, and Debbie.
Okay, I thought Debbie said she would just do one of the ones with Mary. You do both?
You're mute, Debbie. Debbie, you're still mute.
No, I'd be happy to work on both if she needs help.
Okay.
All right. I will summarize this and send it around, but I think I have, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the service side. Yeah, that's what I did. I put the X under the wrong column. Okay, so we've got 3 groups off and running, but wait for my feedback on whether you guys can start talking and have to do it in a public forum, or it can be having your conversations and develop your work plan. Who wants to spearhead the service effort? Who wants to take the lead there?
Aaron wants to do that.
I think Aaron did, yes. Aaron, you want to take the lead on that with?
I will take the lead, absolutely.
Great. Mary, you'll take the lead on police and EMS?
Yes, sir.
Great. And, you know, I think I'm just, Stefan, obviously with your experience, take the lead on the one hand, but Susan, I'm just trying to be very careful of Susan's enjoying her retirement days, but Susan, with your experience, I'll assume the 2 of you together will figure out how to take the lead on that, so. And I will let you know on Anthony. And again, I'll be tracking with all of you, so. Guys, thank you. Any other, okay, I want to set the next meeting. How about, should we try these Mondays? How about 2 weeks from today? If a lot of you are on mute, so if you give me a thumbs up, or if you're not on mute, tell me if that's okay.
Well, let's see. I'm looking up the date for you. So it would be June.
15.
June 15th.
Okay, perfect. It's a weekend council meeting.
Say it again.
I'm not sure. I may be traveling that day, but my daughter's having a baby next week, so I don't know what I'm
wow.
So I'm going to be there for a while, but I'm coming back around the 15th or the 16th. I don't know exactly when. Whenever she throws me out.
Well, if you're still there, will you be able to dial in?
I should be able to spend a little. I think so. I'm not sure.
Yeah, a little
what to
unpredictable.
expect.
I'll be able to, you know, I'll cover for you, Debbie.
Okay, thank you.
All
It's a
right.
big deal. You know?
Chris Howard, how does that date look for you? Thumbs up, good. Les Jacobs, how's that date look for you? Thumbs up. Pat? Thumbs up, all right. Aaron? Thumbs up. Susan? Thumbs up. Stefan, I can't see you, so you're gonna have to get off mute.
That works for me. Yeah.
All right. Tom, Greg, Dave, anything that you're aware of that doesn't work that night? Dave, Greg's good. Tom's good. Dave's good. All right. Very good. So the next meeting will be that Monday, 2 weeks from today, 5 p.m. Again, at the moment, we're still going to stay with a Zoom. We're kind of evaluating whether we can have this at Community House but I don't want to be the guinea pig on that. We'll see how we progress. But at the moment, we'll plan for Zoom. So, any last minute questions, or again, just keep firing off other questions, and we'll come up with a way of starting to answer the ones that have been raised already. So,
Great. Thank you.
longer, but this
Thank
was
you.
the first meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Hey, everyone.
Have a good one.
Chip,
Thanks.
Chip,
Bye.
Good luck
Yes.
with the baby, Debbie.
just so you know, we had a maximum of 5 people that were watching the live stream. There were no questions or comments left, but I did what we have been doing with all of these, and that is please send all questions and comments to Chairman Chip Allwater at your email address.
Great.
You may get some questions, but again, we only had a maximum of 5. They do remain on YouTube, so many more people can view them, when it's convenient.
Great. Excellent.
Okay, thank you
Right.
very much, Tom. Appreciate everything. So I'm delighted to think that your last meeting, you started the YouTube stream early, and this one, and So we've had 2 good experiences doing that. I
Well,
think that
Again, I don't,
simplifies it anyway.
yeah, and there have been problems with Google and YouTube.
Yeah.
So that could happen again.
Well, the truth is, this is a complicated setup. You've got Zoom having to interact with our website, having to interact with YouTube, and all the pieces parts have to work together, and it's it's not foolproof.
It does sound like the capacity might have been the issue, but at least it's working, whether it's coincidental or not. But thank
Yep.
you.
Yep, but thank you for working on it as well as you
Absolutely.
have. That's for sure.
All right. Okay.
right.
We're adjourned, correct?
We are adjourned.
To stop the live stream.
Yep, we're done. Thanks.